Come on, everyone! They're here! They're in orbit! Heavens, there's so much to do!
Crichton rushed down the sloping corridor, pausing only to water a lusciously green plastic pot plant. Things were going very well indeed. The girls had been quiet and really most forlorn of late. Being marooned light years from home with scant hope of rescue had been very trying, to say the least. He'd done his best to keep them entertained, to keep their spirits high, but over the last few weeks he'd felt intuitively that they were losing hope. Even his Friday night concert parties, usually the highlight of the week, had begun to be greeted with growing apathy. Miss Yvette was especially guilty of this. She hadn't particularly enjoyed them from the beginning, and had told him so. The concert parties always began in the same way. After baths and supper, Crichton would clear the decks while the girls played cards or read. At 9 sharp, the lights would be dimmed, and Crichton would tap dance onto a makeshift stage in the engine room, singing "I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy," juggling 2 cans of beeswax. And then he'd go into his impressions. His best one was of Parker, the mechanoid aboard the Neutron Star, but none of the girls knew him, so it never went down that well. Then there were the magic tricks, or, to put it more accurately, the magic trick. He would lie in a box and saw himself in half. It wasn't much of a trick, because he actually did saw himself in half. And then the evening suffered a slight hiatus, while they waited the 40 minutes it took for Crichton to reconnect his circuitry. Then he'd round the evening off with a selection of hits from The Student Prince. And then they'd play prize bingo. The prize in the prize bingo was always a can of Jiffy Window Clean. Nobody ever wanted a can of Jiffy Window Clean, so Crichton always got it back and was able to use it as the next week's prize. In an odd kind of way, Crichton was grateful for the accident. His life had taken on a new vitality. He was needed. The girls depended on him. His days were full. There was the cooking, the changing of the bandages, the physiotherapy, the concert parties, and, of course, there was the cleaning. Crichton took an almost orgasmic delight in housework. Piles of dirty dishes thrilled him. Mounds of unwashed laundry filled him with rapture. An unmopped floor left him dry-mouthed with lust. He loved cleaning things even more than he loved things being clean, and things being clean sent him into a frenzy of ecstasy. And at night, when everyone was safely tucked in bed, and all the chores were done, and there was absolutely nothing left to clean, then, and only then, he'd sink into his favourite chair, cushions a-plump, and watch Androids. Androids was a soap opera aimed at the large mechanoid audience, who had huge buying power when it came to household goods. Crichton had all 1,974 episodes on disc. He'd seen them all many times, but he still winced when Carstairs was killed in the plane crash. He still wept when Rose left Benson. He still laughed and slapped his metal knee when Hudson won the mechanoid lottery and hired his human master as a servant. And he always cheered when Molly took on the android brothels, put the pimps into prison, and set the prostadroids free. Androids, he told himself, was his one vice. That, and the single chocolate he allowed himself each viewing to conserve supplies. When he watched Androids, he wasn't just a mechanoid, marooned light years from nowhere, with 3 demanding dependents and a never-ending schedule of work. He was somewhere different, somewhere glamorous, somewhere else. He was Hudson, winning the lottery and hiring a human to serve him. He was Jay-Z, swinging the mega quid-buck deals, dining in the best restaurants, living in his vast penthouse atop the Juno Hilton. He was someone else. Crichton rushed down the slope and onto the main service deck where the girls were breakfasting.
Come on, they're here!
He clapped his hands. Richards, Schumann, and Fantozzi didn't move. They hadn't moved, in fact, for almost 3 million years. The 3 skeletons sat round the table, in freshly laundered uniforms, and grinned.
I don't know what's so funny,
said Crichton.
They'll be here any moment, and there's so much to do.
He clucked and shook his head.
Miss Elaine, honestly, you haven't even made an effort. Look at your hair.
He fussed over to the table and took out a hairbrush.
What a mess you look.
He hummed, "Stay young and beautiful," and combed her long blonde wig with smooth, gentle strokes. When her hair was just so, he stood back and eyed her critically. He wasn't quite satisfied. He took out a lipstick that matched her uniform and touched up her makeup.
Dazzling. You could go straight onto the cover of Vogue.
He shuffled down the table.
Miss Yvette, you haven't touched your soup. It's no wonder you're looking so pasty.
He patted her gingerly on the shoulder. There was a long, slow creaking noise, and the skeleton slumped, face down, into the bowl of tomato soup. Crichton threw up his hands in horror.
Eat nicely, Miss Yvette. What will that nice Captain Rimmer think if he sees you eating like that?
He hoisted the skeleton back onto the chair, sprayed her with a squirt of window clean, and gave her head a quick polish.
Now then, Miss Kirsty.
He waddled over to the remaining skeleton and looked her up and down, the trendy knee-length boots, the chic, deep-red miniskirt, and the peaked velvet cap cocked at a racy angle.
No,
he beamed, putting the hairbrush away.
You look absolutely perfect.